Hello, students for Sharpstown International Summer School. Welcome to your second week of summer school classes. I'm here to do our video lesson for Monday, June 15th. Please do not be alarmed by my summer hat. I was wearing it outside earlier, and if I take it off, I have major hat head, so I'm going with it all day. It's just gonna be how it is now. I'm wearing this hat until I shower. So today we're going to be talking about how to write a thesis statement, how to do an introduction in an essay, and then we will also be talking about being able to identify incomplete and complete thoughts and how that helps us with dependent clauses. So we have two portions of our video lesson today. One is about essay writing and one is a grammar lesson. So the first portion that we have here, we're going to be talking about how to complete a thesis statement. Now, this is review for many of you, but that doesn't mean that we can all do it really well, because sometimes when I go read essays, we still have lots of issues with thesis. So our first topic that's pretty basic that we're going to talk about is, should students be required to wear school uniforms? Okay, so when you're considering this persuasive topic, I want you to always think about both sides first. And if you've had me as your teacher, you already are familiar with this, but I'm going to want you to have a T-chart where you brainstorm both sides. You need to think of ideas for the yes and think of ideas for the no. If you just go with your gut instinct, but you can't actually back it up with any logic, that's going to be really problematic for you later when you're writing your essay. So when you get your prompt, what do I do? That your first step is to read the question and then brainstorm both sides using a T-chart. So if our prompt is, should students be required to wear uniforms? Under my yes, I might put, it increases school safety. It allows teachers and administrators to see school intruders, because if everyone's wearing one shirt and then there's someone in a different color, they'll stand out like a sore thumb. I might say, yes, students should be required to wear uniforms. It's more equitable to all students regardless of income. So like poor students and rich students are all going to be dressed the same. You're not going to have these like popularity based on who has like the most designer shirts, things like that. And then my last reason for yes would be, there might be less distractions, because if everyone's in a uniform, you won't have like dress code issues with different clothes that might be distracting to students. Okay, so those are my reasons for the yes side on my T-chart. If I have my T-chart, those reasons, yes, safety, less distractions, and more fair for low-income students, they will all go here. Now, on my no side, there are reasons why we shouldn't have uniforms. I would say that they limit creativity and individuality. They can be a problem for students who don't have easy access to laundry machines. Like if your family only can wash clothes at a laundromat, but then your mom is working and then you're watching there's just all kinds of issues sometimes with people who don't have a lot of access to laundry and cleaning clothes. And then lastly, I would say not proven effective against school shooters. If someone comes in with a weapon, then them wearing a different shirt isn't necessarily going to stop them. So if I'm looking at my T-chart and I have my yeses and my no's, and I've thought about both sides, I think that my reasoning for the yes side is strongest. And that's always what you're going to want to go with. Don't go with what you actually think or feel. Go with what you can argue or prove. So I'm going to go with yes. And then your thesis statement needs to have three portions. It needs to have the subject of the essay, which is school uniforms. It needs to have my opinion, which is they should be in use. And then it needs to have 2 or 3 reasons. This is kind of like your thesis statement 101. So you could have one reason if it's like a big reason that you're going to break up into sub reasons in your body paragraphs. Or if you don't want to get that particular, you can have just 2 reasons in your thesis or 3 reasons. So my thesis statement, after I've looked at and evaluated my logic and said that yes is stronger, my thesis statement would be, students should be required to wear school uniforms because it will increase school safety and is more equitable to students in all income brackets. Okay, so I have my subject, students students in uniforms. I have my opinion. They should be wearing uniforms. And then I have 2 reasons: school safety and more equitable. Now, that word equitable might be like a vocabulary word for some of us. It's basically meaning it's more fair to people from all incomes. It's because equality is one thing where you have everyone having the same, but equity is like about fairness and justice. So people who don't necessarily have the money to go buy fancy new clothes every year for school have that school uniform. It's sort of like a go-to inexpensive outfit for their children. Okay, so that would be how to do a basic thesis. Beyond that, we have a more complicated topic, and that's been in the news lately, about protesting. So it's definitely more complicated than school uniforms. School uniforms is sort of our basic one. But the prompt that I was going to talk about next would be, should people be allowed to protest? Because we've seen in the news, there's been protesting all over the country with the Black Lives Matter movement. And so some people have some opinions saying that like the protests have gotten out of hand or that they should be shut down. Peaceful protesters were cleared out in Washington, D.C. so that the president could go make a, I guess, press release statement or whatever. And so some people would say these protesters should be cleared out. We should shut the protest down. On the other side, people are saying that people should be allowed to protest no matter what. So this is another persuasive topic. It's really been in the news. If you haven't heard anything about these protests that have been going on, I encourage you to pay attention, because hopefully some changes are made because of them. And they've been happening all across the country, or even the world. So that would be our topic. Should people be allowed to protest in the United States? So here I would have brainstormed both sides. I would think about, on the yes side, I would say it's protected by the Constitution. It says in the Constitution that people should be able to peacefully assemble, and also people should have free speech, so they should be able to say, their opinion. Another reason why I would say yes, people should be allowed to protest is because there have been unfair deaths and relating to police brutality. So there needs to be a change in the country as far as most people are concerned, that people shouldn't be killed by the police when they haven't had a trial. Like, you can't just go around killing people. So that there needs to be some kind of meaningful police reform in this country, and then the protest could lead to that. And then lastly, my other reason that I put down was that the large majority of these protests are peaceful, so they should be allowed to continue. Okay. Now, on the flip side, the counter argument to the prompt, should people be allowed to protest? We see that there have been some instances of unrest during these protests. Like, it starts off peaceful, but then people are very angry because of the killings that have happened or the police brutality that has happened. So then things get out of hand. They start off peaceful, but then there have been instances of things being set on fire, or fights breaking out, or people throwing things or breaking into buildings, stealing stuff, just general chaos and mayhem. So a lot of people who are saying that the protests should be shut down are talking about how there shouldn't be destruction of property. That would be one reason some of the protests have led to destruction of property. Some of the protests have led to chaos. Some of the protests have led to violence, although it was very limited. So if I look at my reasons and I'm saying yes, people should be allowed to protest, or no, people should not be allowed to protest, I think that my reasoning is stronger for yes, people should be allowed to protest, because the large majority of the people who are protesting are doing it peacefully, and change needs to happen. And then lastly, it is protected by the Constitution. So we need to protect people's constitutional rights. The Constitution is what our country is based on. If people are told that they're not allowed to peacefully protest, then that's violating their civil rights, their human rights. Okay, so I would write a thesis based on that brainstorming. that would go somewhere along the lines of, these protests should be continued to be allowed throughout our nation because the large majority of them are peaceful. The country needs meaningful police reform, and the right to peacefully assemble is protected by the Constitution. Okay, so here we see the subject, protesting. The opinion that I'm arguing is should be allowed. And then I have 3 reasons for this one, actually. Mostly peaceful. We need meaningful reform. And the right to assemble is protected by the Constitution. Okay, so you'll see this document on the hub where you can read that thesis statement and actually see what I'm about to read to you. I actually want you to have that pulled up. So go ahead and find the example introduction document on the hub and pull it up really quickly. That way you can read the introduction that I wrote for you to look at as an example. I'm going to read it out loud. You can read along with me. And you'll find everything about the school uniforms, the brainstorming in this document as well. So I have written an example introduction. Your assignment today is going to be to post an introduction that you write for the topic that I post on the hub. So what we're going to go over right now is literally a sample, an outline for what you can do when you turn in your assignment for today for summer school. So the 3 basic parts to the introduction that I want you to think about, and this is on the hub as well, is the hook, and then background information, and then your thesis should be the last sentence of the introduction. So the hook is going to be something that should get your reader's attention, and a lot of times people have really corny things that they put as the hook, and it doesn't always work out so well. So I would you can look at my example, anything that will grab the reader's attention. I would not use a rhetorical question, and I would definitely not use the prompt, because that's not interesting. If an essay reader reads 800 essays that start with the prompt as the first sentence, then that's not gonna hook your reader in at all. That's gonna bore them. And the point of the hook is to engage the reader. So after the hook, you need some background information to kind of explain the topic, like why are we talking about this? And you'll see my example that I've posted for you. And then after you provide relevant background information on the topic, then you'll put your thesis statement. And the thesis needs to be the last sentence of the introduction. Those of you who are coming in as rising 10th graders, and then I'll be your teacher, or Ms. Knappik will be your teacher, I really want you to get that in your head, that the thesis can't go wherever you want. The thesis has to be the last sentence of the introduction, and then you'll be knowing that before I even start teaching you for the fall semester. Okay, so you have the document pulled up on the hub that says introduction example, and here I have an introduction example for the topic of should people be allowed to protest. So I'm going to read it, you read along with me. No justice, no peace. This is the phrase that can be heard ringing through the country in hundreds of cities nationwide. On May 25th, 2020, a black man named George Floyd was killed by a police officer who put his knee on his neck and slowly suffocated him for 8 minutes. This horrific killing was caught on camera by a bystander, and this death has led to nationwide protests against police brutality and racism. A small percentage of these protests have led to destruction of property, stealing, and unfortunate violence. These protests should be continued to be allowed throughout our nation because a large majority of them are peaceful. The country needs meaningful police reform, and the right to peacefully assemble is protected by the Constitution. Okay, so you see, introduction not that hard. I have my hook, the no justice, no peace quote. That is a quote that protesters who are arguing for the end of racism or the increase of civil rights usually say. No justice, no peace. So that's kind of a quote that might like get someone, oh, I've heard that before. I might be somewhat interested in this essay. Then I give the background information about why these recent protests started. The murder of George Floyd was obviously extremely horrible, horrific, and saddening. And so I give that background information so that people understand why racism is being protested against right at this time in history. You just want to provide context. So you think about what you want to put for your background information. You just think like, okay, what is happening in history? Where is it happening? When has this topic started to be an issue? And then those kind of who, what, when, where, why questions will give the context so that your thesis and the rest of your argument are understood by your reader. And then the last sentence that you see there, these protests should be continued to be allowed. And then I have my 3 reasons, because most of them are peaceful, the country needs meaningful police reform, and the right to assemble is protected by the Constitution. Okay, so for your assignment for today, you will be writing an introduction, and you can see the prompt on the hub in the assignment. You'll need to type your introduction and then turn it in, and it will be a grade. If you have any questions about how to write a thesis statement, hooks, or background information, please email me or talk to me on Teams. Okay, so we have now finished the first portion of today's video lesson on hooks, background, and thesis, and we're going to move on to the grammar portion. So we have an assignment on no red ink that is due today, so you have to get it done today. I am requiring you to do something every single day because this is summer school. It's only 16 days long, but you don't have like freedom to do it next week. You need to get it done today. And if I put in a 0 for you, you can have a little bit of leeway if you communicate with me. So like if you turn something in 1 day late, okay, and you email me, then I'll take it. If we're talking about more than a week late, I'm not taking it because things got out of control with the online school back in spring semester where people were turning in things 6 weeks late, and I'm like, I can't keep up with every single person having their own personal deadlines. So you need to try and get things done when I say. And this is due tonight. So I'm going to start putting in these grades possibly as soon as Tuesday, tomorrow. Okay, so if you go on to No Red Ink, you will see an assignment for today's date, and the assignment is called, let me look at the actual name so I don't get it wrong, dependent clauses. Okay, so you have 2 portions of this practice, and then there will be a quiz by the end of the week. This is one of the number 1 things that we see in our students' writing that's problematic, is that sometimes we write with sentence fragments, and we need to fix that. So we need, the first portion of the No Red Ink assignment is going to be asking you to identify complete thoughts versus incomplete thoughts. So I have some written down right here. If we look at the first one, it says, I went to the store because I needed milk. So I have highlighted the complete thought in lime green. I have crayons instead of highlighters because I live with my 2-year-old. So I went to the store. That is a complete thought. It's a complete sentence. There's a subject and a verb. I went to the store. It makes sense on its own, okay? If I came up to you and said that, you'd be like, okay, that makes sense as a full sentence. Now, the second portion that's highlighted in pink, because I needed milk. That is an incomplete thought. Because if I just walked up to you and said, because I needed milk, you're wondering what else happened. That conjunction because makes us think that portion should be connected to another part of the sentence. We're waiting for the rest of the information. So it's an incomplete thought because it couldn't stand alone to make sense. So if we combine them, you see the green and the pink combined. It says, I went to the store because I needed milk. That is a perfectly fine sentence. It has an incomplete thought, but it's connected to a complete thought. So a dependent clause is connected to the independent clause. We're good. The problem is if you're writing in incomplete thoughts, those are sentence fragments, and that's improper grammar, and it's confusing to read. So we need to make sure that when we do the practice, we're able to identify incomplete thoughts, but we're also applying that to our own writing, and we should have no fragments standing alone as a sentence because it's not right. So I have a couple more examples here. It says, I like ice cream. Who doesn't? I like ice cream and putting lots of sprinkles on top. Okay, so in the pink it says putting lots of sprinkles on top. If I just came up to you and said putting lots of sprinkles on top, you'd be like, what are you talking about, miss? That's crazy. It's an incomplete thought. If you connect it to what I have highlighted in green, I like ice cream and putting lots of sprinkles on it, then we have a complete sentence right there. Okay, another example of an incomplete thought that is commonly done, that a lot of students, even some of my older students, have done. When I go to the store. If I just walked up to you and said, when I go to the store, when I go to the store, you'd be waiting for the other part of the information. What is she going to do when she goes to the store? Is she going to buy something? Is she going to steal something? Is she going to run away? Like, we don't know. So that is because it starts with the when. If I just said, I go to the store, that's a complete thought. If you add that conjunction when, makes it a dependent clause, you have to have it connected to another portion of your sentence. So this last one I have here, when I go to the store, I will buy juice. Now that is a complete thought. It makes sense because we have our dependent clause, when I go to the store, comma, connected to the complete thought, I will buy juice. So we're good. I hope that was not all backwards. Can y'all not? Oh no. I hope that worked. Okay, if it didn't work, please let me know so that next time I don't have backwards mirrored letters. Okay, so the dependent clauses, which are your incomplete thoughts, cannot stand alone. They have to be connected to an independent clause. So that's the second portion of the no red ink lesson. So for example, when I go out, I will go dancing. When I go out is a dependent clause, but it's connected to I will go dancing. How you punctuate that is you need to have a comma in between the dependent and the independent clause. When I go out, comma, I will go dancing, period. So you'll see that the independent and the dependent clauses, connecting them together with the comma in the middle, that's going to be on the no red ink, and you'll have that practice for this week. And by the end of this week, you'll have a quiz, and the quiz will be consisting of being able to identify complete versus incomplete thoughts, and then being able to identify and punctuate dependent connected to independent clauses. So I hope that made sense. If it didn't, if I'm just realizing that my camera might be like mirror imaging these words, if that was the case, I'll post it on the hub so that you guys can see a written example. And email me or message me on Teams if you have any questions. So the final thing that I wanted to say today, since it is Monday, please check the weekly schedule that I've posted. You will not be having vocabulary this week because we are going to be focusing on writing for this week. Monday today, you'll have the introduction and the thesis to do, and you have the no writing to do. Tuesday, tomorrow, you will be focusing on how to write body paragraphs, and you'll be writing some body paragraphs to turn in. Wednesday, you'll be focusing on conclusion and counter argument, and you'll have no writing to do. And then Thursday, you'll have to turn in an essay, which is basically taking what we learned Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and combining it. You'll also have a quiz over the grammar from No Red Ink on Thursday as well. So if you have any questions, please let me know and give me a shout. Okay, bye.